morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mike Fox, and I'm the senior partner of Slater Heelis. And it's my great pleasure and indeed privilege to welcome you all to the Castlefield Rooms this morning for the second of our Breakfast in Conversation with events. I know a number of you attended the last one when Eddie Smith entertained us with an engaging insight into his career from leaving Northern Ireland and then joining Manchester City Council. This morning we're delighted and indeed honoured to welcome Sir Howard Bernstein to share some of his views on the development of our wonderful city. Once again, Michael Taylor has kindly agreed to put the questions to Sir Howard, and I'll be inviting them to the stage in a second. Sir Howard is really an individual that needs little introduction. Born in Manchester, joined Manchester City Council as a junior clerk in 1971, I believe Sir Howard, became chief executive of the council in 1998. In 2014, along with Sir Richard Lees, he was recognised as the most influential person in local government. I was going to list a number of his achievements, which are well known to us all, but when doing a little bit of research, as one does, and Googling last night, I came across an article that appeared in the London Evening Standard in 2007, and it picked my eye because it was London, and we're talking about somebody from Manchester. So I read the article, and whilst it goes back to 2007, it doesn't say everything by any means that there is everything there is to say about Sir Howard, but I think it gave a flavour for what he is to this great city of ours. The article was written by a chap called Chris Blackhurst, and it was at the time, if you can remember, that there was talk about a super casino being built, and there was possibly in London, Blackpool was one of the venues, and of course Manchester. And the author starts by saying, "My eldest son is at university at Birmingham. He loves the uni, but loathes the city." A friend of his daughter then says, "It's not as good as Manchester." Apparently she got 4 A-levels, 4 grade A's, A-level, and didn't get a place at Manchester University. The author continues, "Manchester, Manchester, Manchester. It's not even our second city. That title belongs to Birmingham. But you could be forgiven for thinking it's the first, the way everyone's behaving. Fantastic new shopping district, courtesy of an IRA bomb that took out the old Arndale eyesore. A new stadium, confident merged university, stunning architecture, great airport, roads that work, trams, a football team that's top of the league," we'll get onto that in a second, 2007 remember, brilliant bands, Corrie, BBC, Manchester has the lot and more. He goes on to say that he was from the Northwest originally, and it never used to be like that. What was behind the success and the change? Sir Howard Bernstein. He describes as Manchester's single-minded lever responsible far more than anyone else for engineering its transformation. Every one of Manchester's triumphs, and the author goes on to say, bar the football, because as we all know Sir Howard is a City supporter, can be laid at his door. Well, 8 years later, we can add football, can't we, for the Blues in the room. Together with the £1 billion investment in East Manchester from the Abu Dhabi United Group, the continued development of the city centre, the tram system, the airport city, the university. Where do we go from here? I would like to invite to the stage Sir Howard Bernstein and Michael Taylor for a warm welcome.
Howard, that was a great eulogy to Manchester's recent past, of which you've played an integral part. What I wanted to do this morning is talk to you a little bit about Manchester's more immediate future. It seems to be a very challenging time in local government, but also an enormous opportunity as well. So could we start, first of all, just talking about the genesis of the idea for devolution and how that might take the city, and how the city will feel differently under the kind of devolutionary regime with you as the head of paid service and someone, and we can gossip, you can all ask Howard who you think the directly elected mayor might be. But aside from the personality of it, how will that kind of deal that you've done with central government transform business and people's lives in the city region in the future?
I think, first of all, we've come quite a long way in relation to the whole approach to integrating our transport housing policies. We've worked across Greater Manchester, and I think if you look at the overall economic performance of Greater Manchester, even the last 5 years or so, it's been reasonably okay, certainly in comparison with other places. However, if you actually look at what our continuing weaknesses are, you look at skills. We're not training the right people to meet the labour market requirements and what business demands at the present time, and that's set to continue. Our housing offer, a lot of our national programmes on housing are not fit for the priorities of the local housing market. You know, we don't need a hell of a lot of new social housing. We've got enough of that, I think, by and large. Fundamentally, what we need is the ability to intervene in our housing market, remediate sites and pass them on to the private sector to build house for rent or for sale, family housing. You look at how we get people into work, you know, the whole approach to supporting people to get into work is complex. You can't do that at a national level. There's 263,000 or thereabouts people in Greater Manchester who are still on benefits, not in employment. More or less the same number that there were 5, 6, 7 or more years ago. Health, social care, we don't need to say too much about that. So I think there's a hell of a lot that we have to do to improve the productivity of our labour market, and you can't do that at a national level. So therefore the devolution idea we've been trying to bring forward is designed specifically to extend the toolkit in Greater Manchester to enable us to do all of that stuff. And I believe as a result of devolution, you will have a more streamlined health and social care system. We need system change, we need to be more efficient. We'll have a more productive labour market, we'll have a more varied and productive housing offer, and we'll have skills which meet the needs of our employment requirements over the next 5 years or more. And that means economic success or more economic success. And what we've got to do is build on that for the future.
Very good. Just talk a little bit, Howard, if you may, about the challenges facing local government with the continued cutting of your direct, the money that you get from central government, and how you're able to deliver the kind of services that the city needs to function, and how difficult that makes the kind of decisions you have to make.
I welcome this opportunity, actually. All governments are full of contradictions, but one of the most amazing contradictions for me has been certainly the last couple of years. On the one hand, we've seen very, very powerful, robust analyses being produced by senior ministers, Northern Powerhouse, the importance of correcting and rebalancing our national economy, reviewing the way in which we invest in transport, not just looking at HS2, but looking east-west. Some very powerful policy initiatives, in my view, which have come from this government over the last few years. And then you look at some of the other stuff that's been going on, really. You know, places like Manchester, Liverpool, in particular, faced with disproportionately high cuts. That's not to say that everybody, you know, should see increases in expenditure. Fiscal imperatives over the last few years have demanded a reduction in public spend. But if we would have been treated as a council on the basis of average levels of cuts over the last few years, we'd be 70 million a year better off. So places like Oxfordshire and other places in the southeast see very little reductions, some even slight increases, and places like Manchester get absolutely hammered. And what all of that means, therefore, is that our capacity to make the necessary investment to support the growth in our economy is even more limited. And to the eternal credit, I think, of Richard and his colleagues, what they've done is really address, well, what are the priorities of the council? What are the priorities of Manchester? And obviously, it is to grow our economy, and they continue to prioritise that in the face of very, very difficult circumstances. I think there are also other, I think, frailties and perversities in the system. You know, the Chancellor, as part of his autumn statement, announced even further big science investment in Manchester, hugely, hugely welcome, because we all know that if we're going to grow, diversify even further our economic base over the next few years, then how we actually drive science innovation, how we actually support the growth of new sectors is so important. Yet the local government finance system, which we have to work in, effectively penalises us for expanding our student base. We don't get compensated. We don't get compensated fully for the new housing that we bring forward. So at the same time, as part of our devolution deal, we've got a £300 million housing investment fund, very, very welcome. You know, the new homes bonus doesn't currently give us the compensation for new houses, and indeed, perversely, compensates other places in the country who build no houses at all. So we are in a very difficult situation, and what we have to do is argue our corner, which of course I will continue to do.
How did the Northern Powerhouse become identified almost as a George Osborne project, when actually its roots are very much in the town hall? It's they're projects that you and Sir Richard Leese have kicked off, and also leading other local government leaders across the north.
Well, that's
Politics.
Life. And, you know, I think if people would have heard me speak, or Richard, at any time over the last 10, 15 years, I think you would have heard about cities, you would have heard about connectivity, you would have heard about labour market productivity, you would have heard about rebalancing the economy and devolution. I just think all of those things have all come together at the right time. And some of it is about Scotland, some of it is a genuine understanding about how you actually revitalise cities and how you support the north of England's economy. And some of it is also about how you actually reduce public spending. Because notwithstanding all the reductions in local government spending over the last few years in Greater Manchester and Manchester, you know, we are still spending as much in public spending in Greater Manchester today as we were 4 years ago. So the Chancellor, the government are not reducing the structural deficit in places like Manchester, Greater Manchester, Merseyside, West, South Yorkshire. We're not doing any of that. We are spending as much now as we were 4 years ago or more. And that's because we're actually just seeing money switching. We're seeing money being switched away from what I regard as growth investment services, and we're seeing even more being invested in dependency, benefits, health, social care. And what we have to do, if we're going to become financially self-sustaining places, is that we've got to cut public sector costs, but equally we've got to improve productivity and improve tax take. And that's why devolution is also an important part of this requirement as well.
So it's actually about better statecraft, better government, and more efficient use of public funds to deliver services at a more local level. And is that the way the momentum's going from both parties? Because we'll come on to the election in a minute. If we
I think so. I think there are some very interesting policies which people like John Cruddas and others in the Labour Party have been articulating for the last few years. You know, I've not read all the detail. I understand that at the last Labour Party conference they agreed all of those policies, who just never spoke about them. I'm hoping that over the next few months we'll hear a lot more about what the Labour Party in detail wants to do. The Conservative Party is very, very clear. It is in the business of driving functional devolution, and I accept that with functional devolution you get more access to resources. I think we want to move the debate forward so that we're also talking about fiscal devolution as well. And a week on Monday, no, next Monday actually, there will be the Core Cities Summit in Glasgow, and there will be a big debate which I think will secure a lot of national attention, because of course the core cities now, you know, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, etc., are also joined by Glasgow, Edinburgh and Cardiff. So we are now a UK core cities. And of course, even in Scotland, when they're talking about a constitutional resettlement between, you know, the UK and the Scottish Assembly, no one in Scotland, other than Edinburgh and Glasgow, are talking about devolution from the Scottish Assembly down to actual places in Scotland, which is very interesting debate as well. So they're going to be major participants in that.
It's a very centralising force, isn't it, Holyrood?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Politicians often don't like to give up power once they've achieved it. Let's talk about a few scenarios running up to the general election. As we're running up in the next 90 odd days to the general election. I know you're a keen observer of political trends and what might happen. I won't ask you to say what you want to happen, because as a paid servant, it's not your place to, is it? But you've clearly wargamed a few different scenarios. In each one, how does Manchester come out of it? Because you've done pretty, notwithstanding the savage cuts that you've had to implement, relations with the Conservatives, with the coalition government, have been quite good.
Yeah, some would say very good. I think you've got to watch, you know, the same thing applied, didn't it, when with the last Conservative government, and, you know, Michael Heseltine was never out of Manchester, and you talk to Michael now, bless him, and he still talks incredibly fondly of the times he spent here, the things we did together, Hume, the Bridgewater Hall, the rebuilding of the city centre. You know, Michael Heseltine was the guy who gave us the 100 million it was to start the process of rebuilding the city. So the contribution he made at the time was to our transformation was huge. Conversely, it was people like Prescott who went out of his way to ensure we never got anything in the first few years of the Labour government, particularly around the Commonwealth Games. I think people understand the reason why Manchester is different is because we are different. We focus on place before party politics. We think about what's right for Manchester. And you know, our values are there for all to see, and we deliver. You know, and I think ultimately ministers, whatever they think about me, whatever they think about Richard, whatever they think about the city, will always, I think, get impressed by the fact that everybody says the same thing, whether you're talking to business, whether you're talking to political leadership. You know, everyone is joined up here. People have got the same view about the city broadly as everybody else. You know, we want it to grow. This is not just about a business, this is also about the quality of public services. Science is important, this is important, transport's important. So I think they get the same story from everybody here. And secondly, they also see a remarkable capacity for delivery. And ultimately, politicians not only don't want to give up power, they also like to see things get done. And I think they know ultimately things get done in Manchester.
Yeah. When you talk to people in other cities around the country, they look quite enviously at what Manchester seems to be achieving culturally. the new home for the Corner House and the Library Theatre. Home is coming on stream in the next few months, and it looks like a hugely impressive centre. George Osborne announced last time he was up here that the development of the old Granada site is going to have a more permanent home for the Manchester International Festival called The Factory. How much more can Manchester develop as a cultural centre? And how do you manage to balance that really tricky line between investing in things that seem quite soft at a time when you're having to implement cuts to the kind of services that you've described already?
I think we've demonstrated that our approach to regeneration is still the most advanced anywhere in the UK. I'm not being conceited when I say that. We focus on place, we don't focus on buildings. We look at how we can create new places where people want to live, where people want to invest, and which is going to attract the widest possible range of occupations and mix, which is so important to long-term sustainability. You know, people say to me, oh, well, there's a lot of cultural investment going in Manchester. You know, look at Home. I said, well, actually, you need to think about it, but Home's actually quite a smart idea, because what Home is, you know, you had a corner house that was rapidly expanding its activities and didn't have any room to expand without looking for new facilities. And we had a library, which used to be in the bottom of Central Library, the bottom of, we had a theatre at the bottom of the library, forgive me, which was incapable of expanding its activities because of the inherent constraints of the theatre. So we put the two together, you know, we get efficiencies, you get a very powerful integrated cultural offer, you get greater levels of sustainability because, you know, the way the organisations become integrated, it becomes more efficient. And it's a strategy of our time. And then at the same time, you put that new facility in a place where all sorts of strategies have been tried over the past 4, 5 years, 10 years or more, around how we regenerate First Street, and we don't get as far as we would like because it lacks amenities. So you put the cultural facility and the amenities onto the site and you get a win-win. Suddenly the First Street's office scheme is fully let. We've now got other investment, we've now got another office scheme coming through for planning over the next couple of months, and you see a new quarter. I think that is very, very strong, and all within 2 or 3 years. And I think the same thing will apply to St John's as well. This is not. That's
the Granada site. That's the new name for it. Yeah.
That's the old Granada site. You know, it's not you know, the traditional opera house. Of course, opera will be part of it, but it will be not just a festival every 2 years. It will be the festival every day. We will be producing new commissions, new programmes, still doing special things every couple of years because that will be wholly appropriate. And you know, you look at the critical acclaim our festival has received around the globe. We are already widely regarded as one of the top 6 festivals in the world. We're only in July doing our 5th festival. And I think that's an important part of the Manchester story and an important part of our growth profile.
Howard, before we move to questions from the audience, and it's I can see how many of you are here enraptured by the insights that we're getting. I just want to ask you one final point about Manchester's international profile, because next month, of course, you will be leading a group of people supported by 70 private sector partners at the International Property Conference in the south of France, MIPIM. How important is that as a showcase for what Manchester's doing? And how do you think Manchester now measures up to other cities? Because nobody else stands still. You know, what you're doing here, fantastic as it sounds today, other cities around the world are innovating.
And part of the MIPIM story for me, you know, the private sector demand that Manchester is at MIPIM. You know, it's not the public sector. If this was just the council and a couple of the colleagues from Marketing Manchester, Midas, popping off to Mippin for a week, it wouldn't work, and we wouldn't be doing it. You know, the fact of the matter is something like over 70 private sector business partners are formed the Manchester delegation to Mippin, and they demand that I be part of that and lead that delegation. So I think there is a difference here. You know, I can remember 4 or 5 years ago being in another city's delegation, and the public sector stood up and thanked the private sector for turning up to Mippin. In Manchester, the private sector thanked the public sector for turning up, and I think those are very, very different dynamics. I think any city has to recognise now that if we are going to be progressive, if we're going to be successful, we've got to compete effectively in a global market. That's not easy, but we increasingly have now global distinctive strengths. 4 or 5 years ago, when we first started talking about science and graphene at Mippin, people were looking at me and said, what's this got to do with property? We're showing it's got everything to do with property ultimately. It will drive property requirements. It will transform the economic fortunes of significant parts of the city and the wider region. So we have to focus on those distinctive strengths, and we have to be prepared continually to tell the Manchester story, and in so doing attract more international investment. And one final point, we all can't afford to fly around the world and see what other places are doing. What Mippin also does, and that's why I also think it's important, it gives people like me the chance to go round and see what everybody else is doing, understand what some of the new approaches might be to investment and planning, whether or not we've got something to learn. Because as soon as we start thinking that we've got nothing to learn, I think we stand still. We've got to constantly be prepared, all of us, to actually embrace new ideas and new opportunities, and also have the occasional chuckle where people are copying us.
Give us an example of something that you've seen at Mippin that another city's done.
Sports City, the Qatar thing, you know, it was a carbon copy of the Commonwealth Games bid and what is now the Etihad campus.
Nobody died building ours.
Yeah, so that was, yeah. I thought I've seen that before.
Fantastic. Now, I'd like to throw it open to questions. I've still got quite a few more, but you know, this is about you as much as it is about me and Howard. So, who'd like to ask the first question? Yeah, Jeremy there. It is Jeremy, isn't it? Yeah, in the white shirt.
I think there are, I don't think you get everything in one place, and I think you've got therefore to be very sophisticated in how you approach things. I think if you look at places like Hamburg in particular, I think the way it's got, the way it's faced in two different directions at the same time, I think it's very clever around the whole trade element. I'd like to think there's things we can think about there. Look to Europe, but also look to China and everywhere else, and they've been very smart around that. I think if you look at being a smart city, I think you wouldn't normally go to the usual suspects. You read some stuff that everyone's a smart city. London's smart, New York's smart. I think we're smarter than most, but if you think of what smart in this concept should really mean around digital, around how you use data, how you integrate public services, how you plan places, and how you actually decarbonise activity and places. I think you need to look at the smaller cities, and I think we learn a lot more from looking at places like Karlsruhe in Germany, you know, Lille and other, The Hague. You know, we really were. So we've got to be, I think, much more sophisticated in the way in which we address what we can learn. And you won't find everything in one place, though. Again, if you look at how a world sports event can transform a city, never ever look further than Barcelona, because it's still, in my view, along with us, the best examples of how a world sports event was used as a catalyst for affecting widespread economic and physical change.
You're not referring to the year that United won the European Cup in Barcelona, obviously.
No, I'm not referring to it.
I know what you really mean.
Obliterated from my mind a long time ago.
Next question. Right. It's all down to me then, isn't it? I wanted to ask you, you were talking about different quarters that have the opportunity to be transformed in the city. Obviously, people might not appreciate, but Manchester University is consolidating on the central site on Oxford Road, which has left, to my mind at least, a question mark over the site of the old UMIS campus and what that might be. We know a little bit about the dispute the City Council have had with the owners of the London Road fire station. But that seems to me to be an area with tremendous potential, and with HS2 coming on stream, what kind of prospects for a gateway to the city does that area now present?
I think that's the biggest important regeneration opportunity left in Manchester over the next decade, the Piccadilly area. Some huge challenges as well as opportunities, however. You know, if we're not careful, we're going to see 2 or 3 big, you know, rebuilding programs go on in Piccadilly. We need to sequence them effectively. You know, we're going to be knocking it around for the Northern Hub, then people are going to go home for a couple of years and they're going to come back and then knock it around for HS2, then HS3, and then they'll decide right at the end, we need a new station. Wow. And actually, no major international city, except in this country, would do it quite in that way. So we're going to be passionately arguing after the election now, I think, even more volubly than what we've done in the past, about the actual need for a very different approach about how we drive the station investment that's needed, and properly sequence and efficiently coordinate all of those works. You're going to hear a lot of that in the autumn of this year, in my view. So there's that bit. And then, of course, you know, it's not just the City Council having a barney with the owners of the building. You know, it's Manchester, really.
Yeah.
We, you know, whether, you know, it's clear that they do not want to develop that site. They do not want to develop that building. There's no shame in that. There are plenty of people who own sites who can't develop or won't develop. But what they should do is not hold the city back. They should sell it to us. We're not going to develop it. We're not like that. We will find somebody who will develop it, because that site will become even more pivotal to the overall effectiveness of our regeneration programs in that area over the next few years. And we've got to find a solution to this. You know, we can't, nobody can sustain a position that the site's not developable when they've held it for nearly 30 years and nothing, not a shilling has been spent on it. And more particularly, you can't say there's no demand for hotel spaces when all around them they're building hotels. So we have to move this debate on. I think the campus stuff around, you know, some interesting opportunities there, and we're currently master planning that, working very hard with our university colleagues. And of course, because the nature of the core assets of the university are changing and have changed so dramatically, you know, over the last 12, 18 months, we've seen the National Graphene Institute being built. We announced a couple of months ago, you know, the Graphene Engineering and Innovation Centre, the GEEK, as it's fondly known, and you know, the Royce Institute, which the Chancellor announced in the autumn statement, which is effectively a new focus, a new world-class focus on advanced materials. You know, the core assets are changing, therefore we have to rethink constantly what that means for the wider planning of that area in order to ensure not only the university gets the right planning framework, but also we create the opportunities for wider business expansion and diversification. So those are things which we, again, will be working very hard on and are working very hard on. And I think you'll see more evidence of that over the next few years.
Okay. Yes, question there.
My name's Colin Bodkin, I'm involved in off-site build. The city has very ambitious plans for affordable housing. What do you think are the most significant barriers to achieving those plans?
I think one of them has been removed because I do not think that we've had national housing policy which has been remotely responsive to the market requirements of places like Manchester. I think they've been responsive to the market requirements of London, but not Manchester. So, you know, having our own housing investment capability, I think is going to be an enormous help. And that will give us the ability to co-fund and all sorts of things. And can I just say, I'm not making a party political point here around this government. I don't think Labour Party had a housing policy, neither, certainly the last 5 years of the last Labour government. In fact, the last minister who pretended to know anything about housing was Charlie Faulkner, and that was well over a decade ago. So I'm looking forward to working with developers, landowners, and actually starting to drive our housing offer forward. I think the other thing which we've done and we've learned in the light of experience, you know, the partnership we've established with the Housing and Communities Agency, Manchester Place, I think is very innovative, because what that focuses on is how do we actually provide a single customer-facing approach to the development and investment community. How do we work with landowners? How do we assemble sites? How do we get the right planning frameworks in place for the right sites? How do we develop our pipeline of projects across the sale and rental offer? How do we do the really big stuff, which is still needed in parts of Manchester, which is about, you know, taking estates which, frankly, need more than restoring, need renewing, repositioning, and actually not drive some replacement social housing, which will always be important, of course, but more particularly affordable and wider family housing, which is so important to ensure that as people, you know, come to work in Manchester in greater numbers, you know, the forecasters say it's between 35 and 50,000 new jobs we'll create in the next decade. You know, what we want to do is ensure that more and more of those people want to live in Manchester. Don't want everyone to live in Cheshire. Some people will, and it's absolutely right they should, but we want more and more people to live in Manchester and Greater Manchester, because that's the key to driving and expanding our tax base and becoming self-sustaining as a city.
Thank you. Simon.
So Howard, we've heard a lot about the growth of graphene and the university's development. One of the areas that seems to be very diverse at the moment, spread out over the city, is the digital media community. And are there any plans to bring that into...
We have. You know, it's interesting, I'm doing a do tomorrow night on tech stuff. And Manchester, Greater Manchester, invested over £20 million over the last 18 months in tech companies. You know, that's just us. Now, we've done a hell of a lot of work, and we've got an emerging cluster what we need to understand is how we develop our ecosystem in a stronger way. There's a lot of work that's been done which shows that actually business startups is not a big problem in the tech sector. Where the real problem is accessing the growth or seed or money that's needed to grow businesses, because many of them have not got the track record of achievement. And you know, what we launched a couple of weeks ago was through our growth company, the Co-Angel service, where lots of high net worth individuals, there's a lot of leadership in this sector from a lot of high net worth individuals as well. And you know, we're going to move that forward. There's more we can do, I know, but what we've got to do is reduce business dependency on grants. You know, you go to Sharp, you see people working in containers, you see people working on desks. You know, they don't all need to be in shiny buildings. And what we've got to do is drive that pluralist offer and use whatever resources we have at our disposal in the most prudent and efficient way, and to leverage VC and other types of funding wherever we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Howard. I want to ask you one final question. There won't be any more opportunities unless you want to collar Howard afterwards. But finally, my last question to you is, can City catch Chelsea?
I think we are better in the last third of the season than historically, and I think it can only get better for us.
Yeah, and we'd all like a ringside seat when Jose Mourinho completely combusts if you do that. Thank you. We take whoever we support. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much to Slater Heelis for putting this morning on. I'm sure one of you is going to come up and do a salutation in a moment, but may I ask you please to show your appreciation for sharing his thoughts and time with you this morning to our special guest, Sir Howard Bernstein.
Thank you. Thanks very much.